Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Great to have you here today on this latest Cabral Concept, our Total Wellness Tuesday show, where we are going to be going over what nut milk is best and healthiest for you. We'll also be comparing it a bit to cow's milk. So if you're someone that's looking to get away from more dairy-based products, especially as you begin to learn more about how they're not so healthy for you after all, we can begin to transition to what the best nut milk may be for you, your kids, your family. All right, so let's dive right into the show. What I want to share with you here today, I'm going to go through about a half a dozen, maybe 7 or 8 different types of nut milk. I'll go through the variations in vitamin. Well, let's talk about this, right? One of the biggest reasons we say, well, we need to get our milk because we need to get our calcium. So we'll be going through the calcium levels between cow's milk and all the different types of nut milk. I'll be giving you some of my personal recommendations on the different types of nut milk we use. Plus, I will also share with you how to make your own nut milk right at home with no additives, no preservatives, nothing enriched absolutely at all. So it's going to be, again, always try to make the Cabral Concept episodes actionable, but not like impossible to implement, right? So you want to learn from podcasts that you listen to, but you also want to be able to implement, right? So you want the knowledge, but you want to be able to make these things happen. So this show is going to be all about that. I really did a lot of research on this here for you today. And so I've got a couple notes, and I'm actually just going to start to work down that list right now. And then I'm happy to always answer your questions. So easiest way to get answers to your questions are at cabralsupportgroup.com. That's our free Facebook group. Super easy. Obviously, it's free. A lot of people don't love being on Facebook. Listen, I get it. I'm not on Facebook except for the IHP groups and our Cabral support group. If someone mentions something on my feed or whatever it is, friend, or I don't even see it. So I get it. But you can use Facebook for these great private groups. And so basically you can ask private questions inside of these groups. The whole world's not going to see it, right? Just like-minded people. So that's one way. Of course, you can always email us as well. That's not an issue over at support@equa.life. Happy to take those questions too. All right, let's dive right into the show though. So most people, if you're like me, you grow up drinking cow's milk. Now, the issue with that, and there are a lot, is this: whether you're drinking organic cow's milk, grass-fed cow's milk, raw milk, which actually is on its own category. So I want to take that out of the equation at all whatsoever, or just regular conventional milk. All right, we'll talk about that first. The number one reason why cow's milk is not really great for humans, it's the number one IgG food sensitivity that I see in my practice. It has to be at least 10,000 labs for IgG food sensitivities. And the number one is cow's milk, without a doubt. And the main protein in cow's milk, casein. I've done shows on casein before. We'll try to link them up today. So if you want to go to stephencabral.com/1922, that's where the 3 big takeaways will be inside the PDF that we add for these shows. So that'll be easy. And then any other links we'll add to that here as well. But with cow's milk, you have to understand is that when you run an IgG food sensitivity test, and if you don't know what that is, again, we'll link that up here today. What's the difference between an IgE, IgA, and IgG sensitivity? So we'll link up, do a whole podcast on that for you at 1922. But the short of it is this: it's a reaction that you have not right away. It doesn't give you gas, doesn't give you cramping, doesn't give you bloating, doesn't give you hives, doesn't give you a headache right away. This is a delayed reaction, a day, 2 days, or 3 days after you have the cow's milk. It's called an IgG food reaction. It could be any food. Cow's milk just happens to be the number one food we test out of about 300 like so-called healthy foods. We don't test, Fruity Pebbles. So when you look at it, you say, well, what does that end up as? Well, in kids, we see it a lot as eczema, or we see it as potentially psoriasis, skin rashes, headaches, allergies, mucus buildup, joint pain, lower mood, all sorts of issues. I mean, that's really it. And that can happen because an IgG reaction leads to inflammation. And then the inflammation just simply goes after what are those weak parts in your genetics, right? And so for me, weak parts, allergies, right? Swollen eyes, headaches, those types of things, mucus buildup. That would be my genetics. I'm more Th2 dominant. So allergies or just my history with mastocytosis, mast cell activation syndrome, that's where it would lead to, right? And I have no reaction. I could eat a whole pizza and there would be no reaction that night. The next day, maybe a little fatigued more than usual, a little bit more stiff, right? And then if I kept doing more dairy, I'd start to get the sinus congestion and much more. That's just me. Again, some other people will have different reactions based on their body. So one big thing with cow's milk is that it's the number one IgG food sensitivity. And again, it affects children as well. You can run a simple IgG food sensitivity test. You can do it right at home. I do it for my daughters. I do it for myself every year. It's really easy to do. Again, we'll link that up. If you want to just go find it on your own as well, it's at equa.life as well. These are just open source labs you can do right at home. So that's straightforward, okay? IgG food sensitivity, but also keep in mind that cow's milk, unless it's grass-fed, even organic, again, understand that organic means that, okay, it was fed organic-based food. Well, what does it mean? Well, it could very well be fed organic soy, organic corn, but it doesn't mean that it was fed a diet that a cow should be eating, which means it could still be very high in inflammatory levels of omega-6s, which is why we also recommend you run your omega-3 levels, right? And you can do that, again, simple lab test. We'll link it up today at stephencabral.com/1922. But the other choice is this. You could simply eliminate the cow's milk because let's say you're doing the organic, which is great. Grass-fed, obviously, much better, right? Because what are you getting? Well, you're getting a better profile of the omega-3s, and hopefully it's not treated with antibiotics, et cetera, which we're going to talk about now. But no matter what, you still have the protein, and the protein still causes an IgG food sensitivity. So whether it's organic, grass-fed or not, you're going to be more prone to those food sensitivities. There is an argument for raw milk. We were not going to go over raw milk on today's show, especially since it's illegal, believe it or not, in most states, at least in the United States. But again, we'll save that for another topic. I have talked about raw milk before, and you can always search that on the podcast page. So here's the thing. Regular conventional milk, though, which is what the majority of the world drinks. So conventional milk is filled with estrogen-based hormones, recombinant bovine growth hormone. Okay, these are growth hormone stimulants that could lead to the growth of cancer in the body and certainly inflammation. These animals are fed massive amounts of antibiotics right in their feed. Believe it or not, the majority of antibiotics in the United States goes to cattle, because they're fed such atrocious diets that they would be dead otherwise if they were not put on these antibacterials, which are the antibiotics. So these cows live very deplorable lives. It's not healthy for the cows. It's certainly not healthy for you to eat that meat or drink that milk, which is loaded with inflammatory omega-6s and some people believe other inflammatory agents that increase cortisol and stress hormone in the body. Okay, so cow's milk, not a great choice. Really not a great choice. You can make good arguments for some goat's milk if you're not sensitive, or some sheep's milk or something like that, especially in maybe a yogurt-based form, kefir, certain types of cheese, but we're not talking about that today. We're just talking about milk, right? So cow's milk for me is off limits, especially since most people drink the milk combined with a meal, and dairy combined with meat, not good. Dairy combined with, fruit or any of these things, not it's just not a good food combination, right? So that's a big part of it. All right, but now let's look at it at a bionutritional level, okay? So in essentially 1 glass of cow's milk, I believe it's 1 glass I have in here, it's 2%, so it's not even whole cow's milk. You're getting about 120 calories. There's about 12 grams of carbohydrates, okay? There's 5 grams of fat and about 8 grams of protein. Now, if you look at it across the board, out of really any of these except for full-fat coconut cream, we'll talk about that in a moment, which is what not most people are using, you're going to be getting the most calories and most macros out of cow's milk. It's almost essentially by itself a complete meal. And if you take in milk, it should really be, if you're looking at food combining and how it digests, it should really be taken by itself, okay? In Ayurveda, they'll sometimes do some raw milk with some banana. Like that would be a meal for many yogis, right? And we won't get into that today. The banana being essentially cooked in Ayurvedic medicine. It's unique as a fruit, and it's taken in with this raw room temperature cow's milk. But again, we're not talking about that here today. We're also certainly not talking about a yogic-based diet as well, which many are vegan. So but let's talk about this a little bit more. So 120 calories, you get the 12 carbs, the 5 fat, this 8 protein. Okay, again, it's really a complete meal. You get carbs, fat, and protein. Pretty balanced approach when you look at them as well. It's really not that far off from decent macros. The problem is where you're looking at that at source. But the big thing is people saying, well, the real reason I'm doing milk for my kids and for myself is because it contains calcium. And calcium, as we know, is good for a growing body and for our bones. So they say, right? But there are many ways to get your calcium. And the interesting thing about pretty much all forms of homogenized milk and store-bought milk, not raw milk, is that the calcium is not all that bioavailable. And the interesting thing is that due to the acid nature of a lot of these conventional based milks, that again, I always have to phrase this properly. I understand that foods, although acidic or alkaline, are not going to radically change the pH of the blood, which maintains a pretty constant 7.356 pH level. So just slightly above alkaline. But here's the thing. A lot of people, when they make the statement, well, there's no such thing and it doesn't really matter whether the food's acid or alkaline, they're missing the point that you don't get a free ride. Anything you put in your body, it's not a free ride. So what happens is when you put in quite acidic foods into your body, it's not like all acidic foods are bad, but if you put one in your body, well, your body needs to then use some alkaline-based minerals in order to buffer that response. Or, and I won't go too deep on this, oftentimes that means bringing more calcium into the bloodstream. And that means breaking it down. Well, either it's bioavailable already or it's broken down from the bones, etc. That's why when you look at studies with really milk, if we look at true studies, we see that there's no real benefit with osteoporosis. But again, I still believe that you should be getting calcium in your diet. I'm a wholehearted believer of that, so don't get me wrong. It's just I want to be fair here, and we have to also be cognizant of a lot of these studies that were actually done by the dairy industry. All right, so calcium's at 29%. I'm not really going to go through the rest. There's a little bit of potassium. There's a decent amount of riboflavin. Okay, so when we look at that B vitamin, vitamin A, minuscule, B12, 19%, vitamin D, 26%, vitamin E, 0. But again, keep in mind, some of this is just simply fortified as well. And when we look at these percents, you're like, 26% of vitamin D, well, that seems like a lot. No, we're still only talking about based on the 400 or so IUs just to prevent rickets. So we're just talking about disease prevention. We're not talking about optimal. All right. So that's cow's milk. I made the biggest deal about cow's milk because all of these nut milks now, which I'm going to go through fairly quickly, are all being based against cow's milk because I'm saying to people, listen, let's make the switch for your health. If you're drinking cow's milk, let's make the switch. So the first one that was really around and became the most popular was almond milk. So if we look at that, about 30 calories per serving, about 1 carb, 2.5 grams of fat, and about 1 gram of protein. So when you look at most nut milks in general, you're going to find there's not a lot of anything in them. There's like 4 to 7 grams of carbs, certainly not enough to throw off blood sugar. Fat is going to be, that could vary. Again, that's going to vary because we're talking about these typically coming from a lot of nuts. Some of them won't. We'll talk about oats in just a moment, and rice and soy, and then not a lot of protein at all. Okay. So when we look at this, then we're talking about really low calories, low macros in general. So what are we then really talking about? Well, hopefully people, back in my day when I was trying to put on weight to do more natural bodybuilding, I was drinking crazy things. I was telling this story the other day. When I was in my early 20s, I was 22 and I was trying to get to 200 pounds. And as a natural bodybuilder, I was just eating massive amounts of food. And it was actually putting, this is going to sound deplorable. I know that. I understand that, but that's why we can learn from these things. I was putting some heavy cream into my weight gain, whey protein shakes in order to get that anabolic effect. Now, when you look at the science behind that, it actually works. But is that good for your health? No, absolutely not. Is it good for weight gain and muscle gain? Yeah, it actually does work. It's a very anabolic substance. It can increase insulin growth factor, IGF-1. But again, kind of horrifying thinking back on that. Anyway, but that's what we do sometimes when we're 20 years old, 22 years old. I was probably somewhere right around there. I was definitely in college, and that was a goal, right? That was a goal of mine, and so I look back on it, certainly wasn't doing it for health, but was doing it more for body transformation. That's why body transformation does not always equal health. I certainly put on the weight, I put on the muscle, but was that the healthiest thing to do? No, it was not. So when we look at that though, let's go back down the list. All right. So we're not going to get a lot of calories from any of these nut milks. Now, remember, calcium at cow's milk was 29%. For almond milk, you're getting 35% of your calcium for the day. So, almond milk actually has more calcium than cow's milk. So now you can't really make the argument you're taking in dairy for calcium because you can get the same amount in almond milk, actually 6% more. So now when we look at coconut milk, and we're really looking at this now out of a carton, not the can, which I'll talk about in a minute. Well, let me give you one of my favorites for almond milk. There's a few foragers, one near us that you can get, which is just literally almonds and water. So it's like, it's as clean as you can get. Another really, more commercial one that you'll find at a lot of locations is Malk. And Malk, I want to see if I have the label right here for you, because I was trying to look this up just to make sure I had the label for you. And this Malk is just filtered water, organic sprouted almonds, and Himalayan sea salt. So that's as clean as you can get. Now, just keep in mind, when there's no preservatives at all, that these, once they're opened, aren't going to last more than 4 to 5 days maximum, just like making your own. So just keep that in mind. They have a very low shelf life, so don't buy the biggest one if you're not going to use it, okay? So let's get back to our nut milks, though. So coconut milk right out of the carton, 1 carb, about 4 grams of fat, about 0 grams of protein. The fat inside of coconuts is more saturated in nature. So if you care about that, you're going to get more saturated fat there. Okay. How much calcium in coconut milk? 35%. All right. Interesting. Okay. So we go with that. I'm going to glaze over coconut cream. So I use coconut cream sometimes in some of the recipes that I talk about or in a smoothie. But if you just add coconut cream to an iced coffee or tea or anything like that, it's going to clump. It's really just heavy fat. That's what it is. Like it's a blob of solid fats. So if you were to look at that per container, the brand that I like is Native. That's one that I typically use. There are a few others, but Native Forest is the brand that I typically use because the only ingredients are organic coconut milk, purified water, and organic guar gum. And guar gum is one of the few stabilizers that actually have some benefit for the gut as well as a prebiotic. Native Forest is also vegan. They're kosher, gluten-free, non-GMO, and they don't use BPA lining for the cans. So all big benefits there. It's pretty inexpensive, but a third of that, I would actually a fifth of the can. So just about like 1 tablespoon is 15 grams of fat, 13 grams of saturated fat, 2 carbs, and 1 gram of protein. So you're certainly getting a lot of fat and saturated fat in that. So again, do with that what you will. All right. So next up, we have hemp milk. So a lot of people using more hemp-based products. And this has 80 calories, 1 carb, 8 grams of fat, 2 grams of protein. So a little bit more fat. This is going to be a pretty even balance with your 3s, 6s, and even some 9s in there for your omegas. And that has 30% calcium. So that has 1% more calcium than cow's milk. All right. Oat milk. Oat milk, obviously, very, very popular over the last few years, where it would almost never be carried except for a couple boutique places. Now you can find oat milk at most places. I think I just saw that Oatly, the company, just went public. So obviously a huge company now. 7 grams of carbs, 60 total calories, 3 grams of fat, 1 gram of protein. And let's see here, they have 35% calcium, so 6% more than cow's milk. And 100% of your B12. And if we look at these, which I didn't give you your vitamin D, they're all typically between 10 and 25%, and oat milk is actually at 15%. But again, you don't want to take these products for the vitamin D, especially since it's usually vitamin D2 enriched, not the vitamin D3, which is more bioavailable. All right, 2 more to go. The next one is rice milk. Rice milk, I used to use rice milk back in the day because not quite 25 years ago, let's say 22 years ago when I went gluten-free, I was looking for gluten-free alternatives. Now, 22 years ago, there wasn't Whole Foods. There was only just these unique shops. I grew up in Medford, and so I would go to this health food store, which I think was actually called Arlington Health Food in Arlington, Massachusetts. And they actually had rice crusts for pizza. They had rice cheese. They had rice milk. They had all these different things. Now, I want to give you a little caveat here. Let me go through the stats first, then I'll give you the caveat. 70 calories in rice milk, 11 grams of carbs, so a little bit more carbs, total fat 2.5, no protein. Now, how much calcium? 25%. Okay, so this one is a little less than cow's milk in terms of calcium, but again, not by a lot. Okay, the problem with rice milk and rice cheese and rice everything is that unless you know the company, there's a good chance that you might be increasing your levels of arsenic in your body. Arsenic is a heavy metal that is certainly not good for the nervous system and overall health of the body. Okay, so we know that rice milk, probably not our best choice. Another one that's probably not our best choice, but many people still use it, is soy milk. So this has 80 calories, 3 carbs, 4 grams of fat, 7 grams of protein. So when you look at soy milk, you say, whoa, that's a lot of protein versus carbs and fat. Like that might be a great choice. Well, you might think so, but the problem is it's a soy isolate. So for any potential benefits you might get from a lot of the soy isoflavones for postmenopausal women, or anyone that might be able to benefit from a couple times a week of some sprouted organic non-GMO tofu or something like that, this is not the product for you. I experimented many, many years ago. I was around 25, 26 with some soy-based alternatives because I was trying the blood type diet back then. And so I was using a lot of soy. I personally had really bad reactions to soy. A lot of estrogenic-based issues started to happen. Not ideal. I don't recommend it for anyone to consume that level of soy. If you put a little bit of soy milk in your coffee or tea, meaning like a couple tablespoons, is it a big deal? Probably not. But consuming 8-ounce glasses of soy milk, certainly not a good idea. And it also has less calcium than any of the other products we spoke about today at 20%. So something to take into consideration. So when we're looking at these, what are we really seeing? We're seeing that pretty much I wanted to give you one more, which is one of my favorites, and that's macadamia nut milk. It's a monounsaturated fat, and I have the label right here for you as well. And the label shows 5 grams of fat, 1 saturated, 1 carb, but it's 1 gram of fibers, no sugar, and 1 gram of protein. And typically it's made with just filtered water and macadamia nut milks, macadamia nuts, sorry, yes. And then it uses Gelen gum. And that brings me to my next and last point, is that you want to make sure that the nut milks that you are purchasing do not contain any stabilizers or thickeners that may be detrimental to your health. And one of those is called carrageenan, sometimes pronounced carrageenan. And I'll link it up in the show notes as well. I've actually done a previous show on it as well. But at least in lab rats, they've found potential issues. So I do recommend staying away from that one. And the last one I was going to say is that I'm going to give you a recipe, a very simple formula for making your own nut milk. And the way that you can do that is simply with any high-powered blender. So the blenders that I use are all linked up at stephencabral.com/resources. But you just need 1 cup of any type of nuts that you would like. And if you'd like to sprout them, simply soak them for a day in some filtered water, and then take them out and allow them to dry. Okay, so you're going to take 1 cup of nuts to about 5 cups of filtered water. You could do a little less water for more of a nut-based taste, and a little more water for a little bit more diluted. The more water, the thinner the nut milk, the less water, the thicker the nut milk. So you can also decide on the thickness that you prefer. Especially if you like to foam it up a little bit, then you'll want to use a little less water. And the only other thing you need that I typically add is a pinch of sea salt. Now, one thing that I do love to do, and I'll tell you this, is take 2 whole dates, and just toss them in the blender as well. So you get a little bit of that sweetness, natural sweetness, with the nut milk. This is a great way if you're making your own nut milk. And then you can simply choose, okay, what do I want to add? Coconut? Do I want to add macadamia nuts? Do I want to add almonds? How about cashews? How about Brazil nuts? So you can do really whatever you would like. And you can also mix multiple nuts and seeds together to make your own nut milk. So all you can do is blend it all together, and then you'll simply use a nut milk bag or cheesecloth or thin towel to strain this through, and then you'll store it in an airtight container, and that will last you about 4 to 5 days. So just make sure to consume it quickly before it sours. So my goal for you with this show was to simply say, you can choose any type of nut that you want. The macros are not going to be radically different except something like a coconut, and stay away from the rice milk, stay away from the soy if you can. Try to go with one of the other nut milks that you're not sensitive to, and you're going to get just as much calcium if you're worried about that, and you're not going to most likely have any of those IgG sensitivities to the nuts, especially if you've already done your food sensitivity test, which is why we highly recommend you do a food sensitivity test for you, your family. So hopefully this show is helpful. Again, if it was, please do feel free to pass it along to anyone else you believe it could serve, and I'll link up everything today at stephencabral.com/1922. Take care. Thank you so much for just tuning into the show. And as a valued listener, before you go, I want to make sure you are one of the first to know of what is going on right now over at equa.life. We are giving away one of our most popular products for reducing stress, calming the central nervous system, maintaining healthy hair, skin, and nails, changing carbohydrates into usable fuel and energy, and also improving the overall absorption of your B vitamins. B vitamins are absolutely needed for so many of the different functions in your body that go on with the brain, the nervous system, and the regeneration of our cells of our body. So what we do is we make sure, yes, that we provide that B complex in our daily nutritional support. But for many people who need a boost in energy or need to really fight that aging-based process or calm the stress and central nervous system, this is absolutely the product for them. It's also really easy to use. You can use your daily nutritional support shake in the morning, and you can take one activated B complex at lunch and another at dinner, and you are done for all day energy. This is also a full B complex, which means it includes thiamine and riboflavin and niacin and vitamin B6, folate, B12, biotin, pantothenic acid, choline, which is so great for the brain, and then it has all of the methyl donors and inositol as well. So again, this is a full B complex with all of the methylated B vitamins, of course, because that is exactly what the human body looks like, and that is what it's able to absorb. So right now we are giving away about 500 bottles. So we're giving away a lot of these, but they will go fast. And so these are on all orders over $99 while supplies last over at equa.life. This is a $30 value. So head on over, grab your free bottle while supplies last at equi.life. Take care, everyone.